Hello, my name is Roman Djindjihashvili, and welcome to New Opening Revelations. New Opening Revelations are created with a combination of opening novelties played by top players in the tournaments and analyzed in details with the Ripka with the most powerful engine on most powerful hardware, which gives us absolute perfection of the analysis, as well as we feed Ripka some our own ideas, which Ripka develops and gives us total evaluation of these openings and what is the perfect way to play it. So this is a very, very powerful analysis, and you will see it once you start looking at them. So sit tight, enjoy, and you will learn a lot about chess openings. Big majority of chess players from beginning to the expert level, they like very much to play sharp chess and therefore to play sharp openings. But there is a problem with the sharp continuations. You have to be very, very careful what kind of sharp continuations you choose. For example, sharp continuations, some of them, they are bad. For example, I give you a couple of examples actually. Knight f3, knight f6, knight takes c5. This is very familiar, very common position of Petrov defense. And now knight takes f7. Now, this is sharp because white is going to have two pawns for a minor piece and black's king is not castled. But that's not the kind of sharp continuation I can ever recommend and suggest that you can play. This is bad position for white, and there are reasons. Every sharp continuations you choose in the opening, it may not be the best continuation, so which means you may not get big advantage in the opening, but at least it's very playable and you get some kind of equality, but position is sharp. This is different. This is very different actually, because black has two pawns for a minor piece, and the fact that king is on f7 doesn't mean much because white has no pieces developed, and black in this position has big advantage. That's not the sharp continuations can be recommended. However, there are some sharp continuations that may be playable. So we have to know the difference between sharp continuations you can play and you cannot play. For example, e4, knight f6, bishop c4. This is sharp move in Alekhine defense. Now, is this playable or not? The answer is yes, and I can justify this to you. Now, there are several ways black can play. Bishop c4 move is by far not the best move, but white does not get clear disadvantage. So they may play this. And here is the way it may go. If black chooses to play knight takes e4, after bishop takes f7, king takes f7, white will get their piece on e4 back by playing queen h5 check, and now of course, move like king e6 and king f6 cannot be taken seriously. So on king g8 or g6, white will have same queen d5 check, e6, queen takes e4. And so white does not have disadvantage. Black has two bishops, but black is going to need a couple of moves to safeguard their king. They cannot keep rook on h8, blocked by black king. And on d5, we can go queen e2. Position, I would say, leveled about equal here. And if black tries queen g5, knight f3 may be very strong after queen takes. g2, rook g1 check, queen h3. Black is far behind in development. So this is the kind of sharp continuations you can play for someone who does like sharp positions in the open after the opening. However, if we play e4, knight f6 and bishop c4, knight takes c4 is by far not the forced. Black can go d5 here, and on ed knight takes d5. Black can go e6 or even c6 followed by d5, but that's bishop c4 by itself does not force. That's the main disadvantage of this move. Does not force sharp continuations. It just invites black. But black can play c6, d5, or e6, as I already mentioned, and position will be very, very quiet after that. So the other interesting continuation we can see in Alekhine defense that happened between Tal and Larsen when they played match e4, knight f6, e5, knight d5, d4, d6, knight f3, d takes e, knight takes c5, and Larsen played this dubious move, knight d7. Of course, it's dubious, but he deliberately invited white for knight takes f7, sacrifice, king takes f7, queen h5 check, and king e6. Now, this is super sharp position. Now, I don't want to go on analyzing because this DVD we're making now is not about Alekhine's defense and not to go into details of this particular sacrifice. But I want to distinguish what kind of sharp continuations are okay to play and what are not. This position is known to theory, and there is no definitive answer whether it's good or bad for black. That's, again, this is the kind of sharp continuation that is chosen by black after knight d7. Black kind of invites white for knight takes f7, but by far not forcing it. White can go here bishop d3 or bishop c4 or even knight takes d7 followed by one of these bishop d3 or bishop c4 moves. Position will be quiet. So that's another, I would say after knight takes f7 and queen h5 check and king e6. Position is very sharp, it's playable, but it's okay to play. But again, in those sharp continuations, main problem is that you are not forcing them. You are inviting your opponent to get into these complications. Now, there are some sharp continuations that are simply bad. For example, let's go to the continuations e4, e5. Here is something, knight f3, d6, d4, knight d7, or knight f6, which probably transposes to the same, knight c3, and now black can go knight d7, bishop c4, c6, castle, and bishop e7. Now, this is the quiet way to play against Philidor defense. But there is relatively sharp continuation for white. Actually, I like that it's kind of sharp continuation that transposes to the quiet position. Bishop c4, c6, castling, and now after bishop e7, d takes e, d takes e, and knight to g5. Now, in this position, we're attacking f7 square. Black has two moves. Bishop takes g5 or knight h6. Knight h6 after queen h5 and castle gives white, I think, very comfortable position because of a terrible placement of knight on h6. But if black chooses to play bishop takes g5, it's temporary piece sacrifice, of course. Queen h5 threatening mate on f7. And now black can go queen e7, and we can choose between bishop takes g5 and queen takes g5. So choosing kind of a sharp way of playing in the very early stage of the opening, we get some positional advantage. Well, you see after exchange, for example, if we took with the queen and black goes knight f6, white has small but comfortable advantage. They have two bishops in a symmetrical practical pawn structure. How you play this position, I would recommend to go f3 and not knight c3. Actually, I wouldn't recommend to put knight on c3 at all, because it's not the best position for the knight. You notice that knight from c3 has practically no future. b5 and d5 squares are safely guarded by pawn on c6, so I would say knight d2 or f3 followed by knight d2, and then try to put knight on some better position, going to d6, e3, f5, and knight has a lot more future from d2 square than from c3. Now those are some of the relatively unorthodox and kind of a sharp continuations you can choose with white. And actually, choosing in the opening sharp continuations primarily, and I would say about 90% of the time, should be depending on white, because I don't think there are too many openings or sharp continuations that black can choose. We will get back to them. Black can choose playing by black, playing with a tempo down, because black has some kind of hard time equalizing position. But when you are tempo down, logically you have a lot less options to choose sharp continuations. One of them we mentioned, well, in Alekhine, one of them we just mentioned that played by Larsen, knight d7. But that's not choosing sharp continuations, that's suggesting it, kind of inviting white for it. So my goal here is not analyze all sharp continuations and to tell you how to play them, but this is just a guidance. How do you choose how far you want to go with the sharp continuations rather than normal main lines, and when it's okay to do it and when it's not. So, and we're talking about not the sharp openings, sharp continuations in regular openings. For instance, if we go e4, e5, knight f3, knight c6, d4, ed. Now this by itself is Scotch gambit or Scotch opening after knight takes d4. However, or bishop c4 also. However, there is a c3 possibility. This is a pawn sacrifice, and we already discussed on one of our previous DVDs about the sharp openings. This is okay to play for white because white has a compensation for a pawn. It does not guarantee you opening advantage, but you don't get clear disadvantage like a lot of other unnecessary sharp continuations and openings give you. So c3 is okay to play. So with white, you have a lot wider range of choosing sharper continuations. Now, for example, if we go d4, and now d5, c4, e6, knight c3, knight f6. Typical position of Queen's Gambit declined. White, one of the white choices is c takes d, e takes d, bishop g5, bishop e7. This is one of the most common positions in chess theory, e3, c6, bishop d3, knight d7, knight f3, or rook e8. Well, and the same will happen if white played knight e2, followed by rook e8. In both of those positions with knight on f3 or on e2, white has basically two plans. One is castling short and playing for pawn minority attack, and the other one is a lot sharper, castling long. Now, castling long promises more interesting and sharper game for people who like it. Now, you have to look, did you violate any major principle of chess? You did not. No matter when and how you choose sharp continuations, one thing you have to keep in mind. You don't sacrifice too much material in a very early stage of the game unless you get something concrete for it. Well, we all know that. But the other rule that very frequently neglected by people of all ranks and all strengths is development. See, white After castling, white's plan is attack on a king side. But you don't go h3, g4, keeping your king in its center. You have to complete your full development. For example, white goes a5, black goes a5. I also like to go king b1. I played this opening for black, and I like results I got with this. And now black obviously wants to attack on the queen side. And this type of white wants to attack on the king side. And I don't want to go to detailed analysis of this position. Again, I want to give you few critical pointers here. Move b5 is not good because white can go knight e5 and white has threat attacking practically two pawns at the same time, h7 pawn and c6 pawn. Why h7 pawn? Because we're threatening to take the knight, then take the other knight, and then take on h7. It's easy to see. And also we're attacking c6 pawn. So here comes very important point. Suppose black goes h6, bishop h4, and now b5. That's not good either. And here comes the main rule of castling on the opposite sides, how you should play when you castle on the opposite sides of the board. Black's big problem is the h6 pawn. Because of the pawn on h6, white can easily play g4, g5, and open the files on the king side. With pawn on h7, it's a lot more difficult to do. Now, if white goes rook g1, followed by g4, black will face significant problems. And g4, g5 will quickly open position on the king side. This is good. So this is okay to play for white. Again, going to the position where white has a choice. This is the position. So we can castle long or we can castle short. This is possible with knight on f3 and with knight on e2. In both cases, there is a same idea to attack on the king side. I like better knight on f3. This is well justified because white is not behind in development. White's piece is placed better, more active, and that's why white wants sharp positions, although the main continuation is castling. So you see, the criteria we set for sharp positions, white's continuation, castling long, fits all the criteria and meets all criteria, and that's why it's okay to castle long. So this is okay position for white. And again, I'm giving you guidance should you base your choices, what you should base your choices on, and then getting more analysis of this castling long, you can pick up from, I don't know, from database of games, look at the games played with this, from opening books. Actually, in my encyclopedia of chess openings, I mention it for white as one of the reasonably good choices. So now going back, this is all white's choices. Now let me tell you unjustified activity and unjustified way of getting sharp position, which, well, after c4, e5, knight c3, knight f6, knight f3, and the normal move here is knight c6. But Spanish Grandmaster Juan Belon, he invented his novelty. He is a very extravagant player, and he played e4. That's a very well-known move. Knight g5, and now he went b5. Now let's talk about it. This is clear violation of basic principles. Activity before any development. Now, what is plan? b5. That's the kind of moves, not exactly b5 move, but the type of moves you should stay away from. And if you face this move, I should tell you how to deal with it. Now, b5 move is clearly the continuation is not good. Now, what black wants to do after c takes b or knight takes b5 to play bishop b7, secure e4 pawn, and then play h6 and get quick development. But white can play here d3, and then you see black has one knight developed. All pieces are in original position, and they have to deal with the b pawn. If b takes c, then d takes e, giving black absolutely terrible position. There is a threat of e5, and if black goes in this position, e takes d, then we can take on b5. Now, in order not to lose a pawn, black has to take, and now all we have to do just to take a look at development and compare development of the both sides. Now, I don't want you to memorize this, what we did here. I want you to memorize the base of it, how white came up with d3 move. Black violated basic principle of development, which I mentioned practically on every DVD I've ever made so far. And I tell you this, that it's not even once too many times I mentioned it. Not even once too many. No. This has to be because I've had students and I have seen people play who heard it hundreds of times. They still violate it. You can see it on the lower level. You can see it on the highest level. You'll be surprised how many strongest players in the world sometimes neglect this rule and get crushed right after the opening. So you remember, no matter what sharp continuation you choose, you stay intact with development, with basic principles, and as I mentioned in a Queen's Gambit, when you have choices to get quiet position or little sharper position, then you distinguish between one or the other. But in both cases, you have to have your basis, like development and good placement of the pieces, covered. That's the only way to base your choices on. There is a big variety of the sharp continuations white can choose in the beginning of the game, but you have to be careful once you choose. So once more, I'm going to mention that I'm not going to analyze every sharp continuations of every opening, obviously. What I'm going to do now, just to give you some list of them, and I will tell you why I think it's okay to play this opening and these continuations, and it's not okay to play some other continuations. Well, let's go with Caro-Can. Caro-Can normally is a relatively quiet opening. White tries to build some pressure, and black is defending without having seemingly noticeable weaknesses. However, some people try to play Caro-Can very sharp way. What is my recommendation for that? After e4, c6, d4, d5, there are several choices. But before we get to d4 moves, which is probably happens in over 90% of the time in this position, also there is move knight c3. But there is a move b3, d5, bishop b2, and after black takes de, trying to get the knight back by playing knight c3, then knight e2, and knight g3. This by no means is a sharp continuation. It's just irregular, and it doesn't fit to our DVD here. So what I want to see after d4, d5, what kind of a choices of sharp continuations white has. In Caro-Can, it's okay to play e5, and on bishop e2, in this position, there are some sharp, very sharp continuations that has to do with knight c3, and on g6, g4, followed by knight e2, and then knight f4 and h4. This was very popular continuation for white, and it was always extremely sharp. Well, this is okay to play, but you have to put up with learning a lot of modern theory on that. Also, after e5 and bishop f5, there is a move g4, and after bishop e4, which is the best response, is to play f3, and on bishop g6, e6, and after f takes e, to go h4. This is very sharp continuations, but I wouldn't recommend this, because I think if in this position black plays h5 or even e5, they have very good position. But what is okay continuation to play for white here is c4 move. It's not that sharp, it's not very common, but it's okay continuation. And of course, very well known pawn of attack, ED-CD, C4. It does not necessarily offer very sharp positions, but it guarantees you active positions for white, and also requires learning some theory. Well, any opening you play, you have to learn some theory, but especially when you go for the continuations that are sharper than normal. And this is now after knight f6, knight c3, black has several choices, g6, e6, and knight c6. This is something we have to be familiar with. And Last but not least, after e4, c6, d4, d5, there is an f3 move. Now, this is okay to play continuation, because if black tries to refute by d, e, f, e, and e5, you see it's not good for white to take the pawn because of queen h4 check. Then white would play knight f3, and when black takes the pawn, just to go bishop c4. White gained some development for a pawn. Pawn on d4 is a weak pawn for now, and if black tries to defend it, then white will castle, and very strong bishop on c4 with open f-file, white has very good attacking chances. That's okay to play, but you cannot call f3 variation the sharp continuation in Caro-Kann, because it's not up to white to get sharp position here. Black does not have to take and go e5. Black has g6 move here, they have queen b6 move, so they have ways to play this position quite well. So this is brief guidance on Caro-Kann. And now, as far as the Alekhine defense goes, we already mentioned a couple of sharp continuations that white chooses and black chooses. Black may choose d6, which I already mentioned a couple of times, knight takes e5 and knight d7, as well as, but white can actually play e5, and after knight d5, c4, knight b6, c5. At one point, I was very much interested in these continuations, and I had a lot of development on it. But that's sharp continuations. But the problem with this continuation for white, the sharpness only goes so far, and as far as the theory goes. And theory is sharp, but once the theory ends and black plays correctly, position is not that great for white. So this is the continuation. I was recommending it a number of years ago, and now myself I wouldn't recommend you to play. I cannot go on analyzing every sharp continuations of every opening that I mentioned. I said it's more like preview of the possibilities for white or black more than detailed analysis. Now there is Pirc defense. So what can we do? Of course, white Pirc defense and Caro-Kann defense is relatively passive openings. And of course, in these openings, white has more opportunities to pick a sharp continuations. For example, d4, knight f6, knight c3, g6. There are several ways to play this position sharp. And not necessarily you have to go for checkmate and you have to go to open position right away. No way. So one of the sharp ways to play is to go bishop e3, f3. You see this move, if white plays bishop e3 and put pawn on f3, it's a Zemish kind of configuration of white's center, and they are intending to castle long and start kingside attack. Actually, it's one of the most promising continuations to play for white. Same thing can be done. White can play f3 with the bishop on g5. So those are okay continuations to play for white. Those are okay. And besides pure defense, I want to mention a little bit about French. Well, this is, I think, of the major openings, French is the most passive, and I like very much to play against French. It's a matter of taste. What I would mention just in this position, there's the main move knight c3. There is a very quiet and very positional move knight d2. And there is e5 move. Well, e5 move I especially want to mention because sometime if white wants to, they can create some very, very interesting position, which was very popular at some point. c5, c3, knight c6, knight f3, and queen b6. This is main position in e5 continuation for white, when white plays e5 on third move. And the normal move is bishop e2, keeping d4 pawn protected. However, there is a move bishop d3. That's a pawn sacrifice and was popular at one point, and then white played less and less of it, but I think it's still very good, very interesting to play these continuations. It's okay, and actually it's good exercise for your tactical abilities and for your ability of developing initiative. Why is this a pawn sacrifice? Obviously, black cannot win a pawn right away because they're gonna lose the game. And after queen takes d4, bishop b5 check, winning the queen. But if black plays in this position bishop d7, now preventing bishop b5 check in future, obviously white doesn't want to go bishop c2 and lose another tempo to protect the d4 pawn, so white would castle. Black takes, white takes, black takes d4, knight takes d4, knight takes d4, and queen takes d4. Now, here is the position where black has an extra pawn. This is sharp continuation because black just made two moves with the queen in very early stage, and they have to make another move with the queen because, as you can tell, queen cannot stand on d4 for too long. And white has a chance to develop strong initiative at this point. I think the best move is knight c3, or there is also a move rook e1. It's interesting to point after knight takes knight c3, queen takes e5, and rook e1. Black has to play queen d6. And white may go knight b5, try to develop bishop f4. Well, this is something you have to address opening book and your computer engines analyze, but this is kind of possibility to get sharp continuations. I just want to mention one thing here, that after rook e1, queen d4 back is a very bad move because of very interesting tactical shot. Rook takes e6, and this rook is immune. Black cannot capture this rook because if bishop captures, there will be bishop b5 check, and if pawn captures, then will be bishop g6 check. In both cases, black loses its queen. So after rook takes e6 has to be played bishop e7 or knight e7, and if white simply goes back with the rook, they're going to have very strong position. They may even go bishop e3 in this position. So those are continuous. So what do you want to get when you sacrifice a pawn? You have to have some development, strong development advantage, or some positional advantages, such as very dominating knight, but we're not talking about positional, a dominating knight, or very active two bishops, or kingside attack or queenside attack. But you have some concrete compensation that you can put your finger on. So you have to be careful. How do you play sharp continuations? When do you play? And what you get for it? Make sure position is playable. Well, since we know that most of the sharp continuations, if there is a choice between sharp and quiet continuations, can be chosen by white, we cannot go by and not mention Sicilian defense. Okay. Obviously, I'm not going to go now into the classical Sicilian, like Scheveningen or even Najdorf positions. I'm not going to go there because they have their own sharp continuations. They are all justified, and there is a tons of theory on that. But there are some people who try to get very sharp positions right in the very opening of the very beginning of this opening. For example, there is Smith-Morra gambit, where white plays knight c3, or sometimes I've seen, a lot of times, they play knight f3, sacrificing another pawn and playing with two pawns. That's a very sharp continuation. And there is also the wing gambit, like playing b4 move, and after taking d4, that's very sharp continuation. Well, I have certain theory on that, and I'm pretty sure I'm right about it. Well, d4 and c3, Smith-Morra gambit. I wouldn't recommend this for sharp players who want sharp positions to play. And the reason is this. You want to get sharp position. It's not up to you to get sharp position. Black has a way to get very quiet position. So you can get a lot sharper positions playing normal Sicilian, some normal variation. And here is why. After d4, cd, c3, black has number of choices to accept pawn sacrifice, not to accept pawn sacrifice, and play very quiet position, and even to accept and play quiet position. And here is what I mean by that. Well, not to mention d3 move, bishop takes d3, and then black simply goes like a regular Sicilian configuration for that. This is one way to play. D takes c is quite good continuation for black. After knight takes c3, now here are a lot of ways black can go wrong, and I don't want to go analyzing these ways. For example, g6 is not a great move, or knight c6, knight f3, G6 now is not a great move, but black can, if they know what they are doing, and obviously you don't expect, you don't play Smith-Morra Gambit for white and expect black to make early stage big mistakes and you're going to win the game very quick, because if your opponent that weak, then you don't even have to do that. You can do practically anything. But when black knows what they are doing, they can go knight c6, knight f3, d6 or e6, after bishop c4, e6, and then castle, knight f6 or bishop e7, it doesn't matter, it's just transposition, and rook d1. Those are the most common moves for white to play. And now they want to go e5. And now black goes e5, and white has some positional compensation in a form of a d5 square. But that's about it. White position will never be sharp if black wants to keep it quiet. For example, bishop takes f6, bishop takes f6, and if knight goes to d5, black can simply play bishop e6. And later on, black can take on d5, bishop takes, and knight d4. And that's not the position for players who wants really sharp position. That's not it. So this is one way to play for black. Of course, there is a possibility that you get very sharp position playing Smith-Morra Gambit for white, but that's, as I mentioned already, it's not up to you. And let me show you how you can get it. There are several ways black can get over ambitious. And for example, when they play knight c6, knight f3, d6, bishop c4, e6, after castle, they may go a6, and after queen e2, b5, and rook a7. This is interesting move that was invented by some players a while ago, and it was very popular because on bishop f4 or rook d1, black goes rook d7, and after bishop f4, bishop b7, and they successfully conclude development. However, this cannot be recommended because white has here bishop e3 move and rook d7, knight takes b5, very, very interesting piece sacrifice, and white gets a lot of initiative, and actually maybe bad, this may be bad for black. But this is very sharp, but this you can get practically in every opening if black is careless. But you don't have control over getting these positions. Now let's mention some possibilities for black to attempt to get very active and sharp positions in very early stage of the game. And as you can suspect, this list must be much shorter than opportunities for white. Well, e4 and let's face the e5 move, knight f3. Now I have seen, well, on some blitz games and maybe sometimes in tournament games also, people that try to play practically unjustified sacrifice, and it's practically play for traps. d6, so far it's normal, like a Philidor defense. d4, And now bishop g4. Now white plays d takes e, and looks like white is winning pawn, because I don't think black wants to play bishop takes f3. That's the only way actually not to lose a pawn. But then queen takes f3, and after d takes e, bishop c4, white has big size advantage. But the sharp continuations for black in purpose of this is to play knight d7 or knight c6. Well, for example, knight d7 to encourage white to take a pawn, and bishop takes d6. Now, let's look at this position. What is black trying to do? Black is a pawn down. They are slightly ahead in development, but they are down whole big central pawn, and this cannot be recommended. This is highly unjust, unjustified pawn sacrifice, and it cannot be recommended. So what we do here for white, just simply play bishop e2, and when black goes knight f6, we can go knight c3, and after queen e7, that's the main move. Now, what black is trying to do. Now, let me give you a couple of examples of bad play for white. So if white plays badly this position, black is going to get a very good play. For example, castle. Black is going to castle long, and after bishop g5, white may lose the game. Bishop takes f3, bishop takes f3, queen e5, attacking h2 and g5. Well, what white has to do in this position to neutralize black's initiative is to play knight to d4, attacking the bishop on g4, and after bishop takes on e2, white simply plays queen takes e2, and if black castles long, white can simply go knight f5, and then take the bishop on d6, following by castling. Black has no compensation. Now, what does black do? Black sacrifices pawn in this opening practically for no compensation. And I was amazed when I looked how many followers this bad continuation had. It had a lot of followers, and it's a really, really bad way to play sharp openings. There are other ways for black to play bad sharp openings that are also bad. For example, Latvian gambit. This is simply bad opening because there are so many ways for white to get good and a quiet position without much effort. The move f5 by itself shows that something wrong with it. Black is playing with tempo down because that's how black does always, and they try without zero development to play f5 in open position, especially where their king is. What I was saying always, I always thought that king's gambit playing for white is a wrong opening. And I know it is, and I mentioned it in a couple of opening DVDs. Well, but when you go knight f3 and you see the same thing with a tempo down black does, this has to be real bad, and it is. Knight takes e5. Now queen f6 is the best move. And I show you a couple of examples what may happen here. Well, there is d4 move, which is perfectly okay and guarantees white some advantage. After d6, knight c4, fe. White can simply go knight e3 followed by d5 and have a very good position. What is queen doing on f6? As well as the other way to play. Here in this position, after queen f6 is also knight c4 move. And now black takes on e4, and now knight c3. White keeps developing, and black has two moves, queen g6 and queen f7. Queen f7 a better move, but if black goes queen g6, we can go d3, and after ed, bishop takes d3, and on queen takes g2. I mean, I don't have to even mention how bad it is for black. All black did made queen and pawn moves. This is total total disrespect to common sense and to basic principles. And after bishop e4, something like that, black is totally lost, obviously. So the better move is, and the best move in this position, is queen f7, and now white cannot take the pawn because of d5. But if white simply goes d4, they have very good position. Cannot be justified, queen f6 and queen f7. There is an expression that when you play sharp position, you don't want it to be sharp for you. That means you are in danger. It's sharp for you. It doesn't look like white has anything to worry about in this position, and any concern that they are in any danger. Black has zero activity and zero future in this position. It's totally wrong opening to play. One little bit similar to this is e4, e5, knight f3, d5. This is very common in blitz games I have seen. I don't know how common is it in a tournament, but white has many ways to get very good position. The main move is ed, e4, queen e2, trying to maintain extra pawn, and you can see the brief analysis of it almost in any book. Also, what I like to play here is d4, and after d takes e, knight takes e5, and after bishop d6, bishop c4. White has absolutely great position, white has. And if bishop takes e5, now you go queen h5, attacking f7 and e5, and on queen e7, queen takes e5. Now, if we look at this position, this is theoretical position. Now, what is sharp about this position? There is absolutely nothing that is sharp. What is it? Position is quiet. White is one tempo ahead in development. White has two bishops, and black's e4 pawn is a lot weaker than white's e5 pawn because on knight c6, bishop f4 can be played, as well as bishop b5. Those are not sharp continuations. They are unusual continuations. Most of the time are not good. And they look sharp only for a move or two, and they turn out bad. That's not the way to play sharp positions. Sharp positions should be played normally by developing all your pieces and then starting very well justified on the basic principles, attack or combination or the complex variations. That's how the sharp positions should be played. Of course, white has little more flexibility since they have an extra beginning move to play those sharp continuations in the opening. But basic principles remain the same for white and for black. Not too long ago, I pointed there was, I noticed there was sharp continuation was very popular for black in center counter opening, e4, d5, ed, knight f6, d4, and normal move was always knight takes d5, but black came up with the bishop g4 continuation, and that was very popular for black. And the idea is, if white goes f3 to play bishop f5 or bishop h5, and after c4 to play c6, and have some compensation for deficit of a pawn because f3 is played and white's pieces are not developed. And immediately, once they started playing it, I just see it's very unnatural to play early bishop g4. Well, the normal reaction is bishop e2, bishop takes e2, queen takes e2. And why is this sharp? What is black's point? They play queen takes d5, and when we play knight f3, now, if it had an idea of playing here e6, and then bishop e7, and then castle, it would have been okay. Black has a little bit cramped position, but it's playable. However, people that started playing it and people behind this opening, they were they had very ambitious ideas. They went knight c6, they go knight c6 in this position, and when we castle for white, obviously taking on d4 is not good, because knight takes, queen takes, and queen b5 check, getting pawn on b7 and having an advantage. But here is the ambitious part of it. They made castle long, bishop e3, and go e6. Now, what does black want? Black wants to put bishop on d6, queen on h5, and go g5. And I've seen some games black was very successful with it. But there's something wrong about this. Black is not ahead of development, and black has less space on the board. This cannot be right. And we play c4, queen h5, knight c3, and bishop d6. And I immediately noticed that after c5, black bishop has to go back, and giving d5 square to black is not as critical. And I thought c5 was a good move, and all black's position will become very, very suspicious. Then I started searching database, and I found a few games played with c5, and black got destroyed in all of them almost. c5, bishop e7 has to be played, and now b4. You see the reverse side of aggression. g5, g4 is clearly delayed, and black's king is in trouble. Black has no attack, and black is in grave danger. Let me show you a couple of games played with it and how it turned out. In one game, black played knight d5, knight takes d5, rook takes d5, game ended real quick, b5, knight b8, queen c4, queen g4, rook f2 c1, rook h d8, pawn went to c6, and black is totally busted after bishop d6. Queen a4 was played. And after rook h5, simply rook a to b1, and on queen e4, queen takes a7, black lost. So, point I wanted to make is, you don't castle on the opposite side, and that was black's intention from very beginning. You don't castle on the opposite sides of the board, making sure you are ahead in development, and you can develop your attack faster. So this position after c5, white starts attack first and black's attack delayed, and whole idea of making two moves with a queen and two moves with bishop d6, e7 with the only intention to go g5, g4 and somehow get an attack on h2 pawn was totally demolished. So in the other game after b4, I'm gonna show you quickly what happened. And after b4, knight takes b4, rook b1, knight d5, and black also lost very, very quick. Knight takes d5, queen takes d5. Actually, I had this happen in my games too, in the blitz games, but I was already knew this. Knight e5, and after rook h to f8, c6, and the game is over. After bishop d6, obviously b6 will be met with checkmate in two moves, and after bishop d6, c takes b, king b8, queen a6, there is no defense from mating threat, knight c6, and if bishop takes, pawn takes, you see the a7 is under attack, and black lost. It's very typical and very, very logical conclusion of this idea. So black is absolutely not prepared for sharp positions, so they try to play sharp and wasting a couple of tempos, few tempos in the early stage of the game. Playing sharp positions cannot be dependent on desire and on the mood. It has to depend on number of factors. So most of the times they are development, good placement of the pieces, and of course space. That was a very good example of fiasco black experienced in this opening. Summarizing, I want to conclude summarizing our topic of playing sharp positions. Sharp positions can be played in some cases by white. where when they up a tempo before the start of the game, they can try to get a couple of more tempos and sacrifice some material to develop attack. And this can be chosen very, very carefully, because a lot of people know this principle and they go no matter what. They sacrifice pawn for just an extra tempo. Position should be appropriate for it. You should have proper pressure, and you should make sure you can get position open, because in close position, extra tempo too, they don't make that much difference. So you should be very, very conscious of that. So as as far as the right way to make position sharp, you don't try it from the first move. You develop your pieces quickly no matter what happens. And sometimes I surprise how is it that every DVD we make, no matter what the topic is, this opening or the other opening or the tactics or positional strategy, every time we get to the point where we have to explain, develop pieces quick, have the quick development, and get pieces coordinated. Well, it's like all different DVDs. We made a whole bunch of them, but the main principles will never change. And I try to repeat it, and I will be repeating it, because a lot of people playing games sometimes forget it. And it's never too many times to say that you have to be aware of it. And so is sharp positions. Sharp positions, getting sharp positions, and playing sharp, complicated positions, always to be based on quick development and good coordination of the pieces. Having this in mind, you can choose when and how you want to complicate the game, play sharp positions, and be successful doing it. Thank you very, very much.